All right. So that's an interesting moment for me. Our, our guest hasn't shown up yet. And so we're going to improvise a little bit. We'll see what happens. I was so looking forward to have a conversation with Matt. Matt has been with us very much since the beginning. He was an instructor in Tacoma, Washington. He's done so many things. Well, first, he's a self-taught programmer. He joined us as an instructor, but he was still learning to code as well. And he's had such an incredible journey personally in his life. He's a chief technology officer now. I think he's involved in 2 different startups, and he's spending so much time with us and with students. He's an extremely well-known figure, I will say, in the community, in the NewCamp community. He's helping a ton of developers with React Native and troubleshooting that. He's someone really who's built a tremendous reputation at NewCamp. And he also just had a baby. He just had a baby girl. And we're looking around and we think that may be a reason. He may actually just missing sleep and not being able to really maybe keep the schedule up. I don't know. But so he's not here. He's not here. The way it works is typically we will have our guest join 30 minutes before, just to make sure that the audio, the video works. And we'll have a quick chat, and then we'll just wait for the time for this chat. And all right, Shevas is telling me that he's on his way. I hope he's not sleep deprived. I hope he's not doing it um, like by force in a way. But cool. Well, thanks, Javas. So anyway, it's actually, hey, Kothin. Welcome, welcome. So as you know, this stream anyways is kind of open to anyone and everyone. So you can join me while we wait for Matt. You can join me and dial in by following this link, url.newcamp.co/dial in. You can do that, and what will happen is if just switch your mic and your camera on. It works on your computer, it works on your cell phone, and I'll bring you onto the show. We'll have a conversation, especially more relevant now that we're still waiting for Matt. Jason is here. Hey, Jason. Hey, Zendra. So as I said, I don't know if you're just joining, but we're still waiting for our guests. So a great time for me to answer any question that you may have. A great time for you to join if you wanted. Join the dial-in button here. And Paulette, I've noticed, Paulette, that you're going with the elbow cuff. I guess, is it because I do it often? Maybe that's me. So I'd love to answer your questions on anything NewCamp or anything related to coding while we wait for Matt. If you have any question that you'd like to ask, please go for it. I can also kind of let you know about a few things that's happening at NewCamp right now. I can bring you into the inner circle of what has been happening at NewCamp, and I can see the questions now coming in. And so Kothin is asking about what are some benefits of having a mentor. It's a dab gesture, says Paulette. Gotcha. So, I mean, having a mentor, obviously, kind of having a shrink, I would think, is going to keep you on the path. And I see Matt joining us now. Hey, Matt. Okay, I'll let me finish that answering that question, and then I'll bring you in, Matt. So, having a mentor, it's going to keep you on a path. And at NewCamp, we actually have instructors, which are not exactly mentors. I mean, they can become your mentor, but they are mostly instructors. The big difference for me is a mentor quite often will have a one-on-one relationship, and you will have limited time with that mentor. You'll have maybe 30 minutes a week or an hour a week, but you'll be quite limited. We have instructors who are here with you for the whole week, and you can have actually way more than just 1 hour. But then that instructor is also available to other students. So instead of being one-on-one, it's 1 to 12 or 15. But now that we have Matt, let me bring Matt on the floor and we can have that conversation. Hey, Matt.
Hey Ludo, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Thank you for joining. I was wondering if you were going to join. Maybe you just thought that we were going to start just at 3 p.m. and that would have been just fine as well.
Yeah, I was having some baby time, so
I was
had to
wondering.
put her down. Yeah, so sorry about being late.
No, that's okay. That's totally okay. Well, I was actually telling the audience that yeah, you just had a baby girl. How many months? How old is she now?
She's only like 15 days now,
Yeah,
so
15
she's
days.
still
Oh my
pretty
god.
young. Yeah,
And Irene was telling me that it's pretty tough on sleep deprivation and all that. You're experiencing all that.
yeah. She sleeps really well during the day, but at
Okay.
nighttime she doesn't want to sleep. So
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I really appreciate that you're taking the time. Then, remind me, is it your first one or your second or?
I have a 15-year-old son.
Okay.
He's 15 and a half now, and yeah, so I kind of starting over.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a while since you've experienced that. So, well, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time, especially given the family situation and that you have to look after your baby. Obviously, I was really telling the audience how much of a figure you are at New Camp. And how much of a reputation you've built in the community as someone that people look up to for advice, for mentorship, for pretty much giving them an example of what it looks like to be, in your case, I think, self-taught up to becoming a chief technical officer. There's a ton of people that are actually starting to ask questions. That's awesome. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about your journey. We're
Okay.
going to talk about your journey and from your beginnings as a self-taught and how that looked like. And then I want you to spend as much time really talking about what you're doing now because I know it's pretty exciting. All the startups and the technologies you're involved in.
Yeah, I feel
So
like I spend a lot of time with different projects nowadays. So
yeah, you do. It's a good thing. And then we'll answer some of those questions. So Matt, let's. I mean, please actually first please introduce yourself. Where are you dialing in from? What are you doing today? I mean, those days, professionally, and then
yeah,
actually take us back to when it all started for you. When did you actually start to look into learning to code?
yeah. So it was a really interesting story. I'm really glad that I get to tell people about it because New Camp changed my life before they probably realized it. It was very fun times for me. So that's kind of why I give back a lot to New Camp because of how much it changed my life personally. So to say again, my name is Matthew Moser. I've been a developer. I've been kind of learning development since I was about 14 years old. So
Yeah.
it was quite a bit of years ago, back before Google and Stack Overflow. Um, Nothing real professional till about 5 years ago, when I was a blackjack dealer at a casino, and one of uh, the owners had asked me if I could write some software for them, and I was always told to just say yes and then figure it out like after that. So I said, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. And so that's what I did. I wrote a software for them to run promotions across their casino. And then as I was dealing blackjack, I said to myself, like, I really want to get out of doing this. Like, I really want to be
Yeah.
coding full time because I spent so much time coding and it was such a passion for me. It's like built into my DNA. And so I started looking around. Um, and one of my coworkers, his name is Dennis, and DJ, I believe he's also called, but he was one of the first
Oh,
students of
that's
New
right.
Camp. But I've known him for years. And he told me he was taking New Camp. I said, well, I kind of want to get into something. So I was thinking about taking New Camp. So I signed up to just on the website to look for it, to see what it's all about. And I said, I really think I'm going to take New Camp, right? So, but I wasn't sure if I was going to go the Angular route or
Hmm.
if I was going to go the React route when I kind of switching technologies. And I got a phone call. I kind of put it out into the universe, like, what should I do here? I get a phone call within a few days later from Paul Turner.
Yeah.
I didn't know Paul at the time. And he said, hey, I looked at your resume and I was wondering if you'd be interested in teaching at a boot camp that I'm working with. And I said, oh, what's the name of the boot camp? And he said, New Camp. I said, well, this is very interesting. I said, what would I be teaching? Because I don't know what's there. And he said, well, we're switching from Angular to React, and so we're looking for someone to teach React, and we see that you have some JavaScript experience, and we'd like for you to see if you're interested in that. I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, give me some time to learn it. I'll take the course, and then I'll go and then I'll teach it. And so that's what I did. I kind of started my journey teaching React right after I learned it. But I learned so much from helping the students.
Yeah.
They ask questions, I go and find the answers. And so from there, that was about 3 years ago now. And so after about a year into teaching, I said, well, I can't go and like tell all my students, yes, please go out and get a job and work really hard. And this is what you have to do to get a job if I haven't done it myself. But it was hard for me to kind of make that leap of faith of get out of my 15-year, career of being a blackjack dealer to being a developer. But
so I
needed to do it.
I remember that time. So maybe some context to the folks that are listening to us. You and I started kind of together in Tacoma, Washington, with Paul. And I remember that time. And by the way, do you remember Austin, who was actually teaching with us? Hey, Austin, great to have you here.
Austin I met him, he was teaching when I started teaching.
That's right. Austin, I don't know if you're still in Canada, but send me an email, see what you're doing now. So you started in Tacoma, and I know Paul is very proud of, being the one bringing you in. But I completely forgot. So I really knew you were not a student. Like I did not remember you as a student, but I remembered you as an instructor back then. But I forgot about the connection with Dennis. And I remember Dennis was actually one of my first students. He was probably in my first cohort. And you're right. I mean, for those who don't know, we actually started teaching Angular. That's why actually the website, the New Camp website, is built in Angular. That's kind of the language I learned myself and kind of, use that. And then we switched over to React. And Austin says, yeah, he's still in Vancouver. Awesome. Well, good to have you here, Austin. And Moses, I see you're joining. Let me actually continue the conversation with Matt, and then we'll bring you onto the floor. Okay, Moses, if you don't mind. We have Moses here waiting to ask his questions. So you, well, it's really interesting. So you were a blackjack dealer, but then you kind of had your first break by having your manager at the time ask you to build an app for them. That didn't come out of the blue, I'm sure. He probably knew, right, that you were coding on the side. I mean, how did that happen? How did you get from dealing blackjack and then someone asking you to build an app? Like how did you talk about what you were doing?
So I attempted to start a computer repair company, and because I've been working with computers since I was 9 years old, and I kind of started in the hardware, break-in hardware to learn how to fix it type stage when I was younger. And so I said, let me do a computer repair shop. I found a real small office, and we tried to start that out. While I was waiting for customers, I was coding. And I wrote an app because I worked for the casino. So I said, well, maybe there's some sort of app that I can build. If you find a need, fill it. And so I said, they're so non-technical that maybe I could build an app and then pitch it to them, and maybe they could use it just to kind of, it'd be fun to say, oh, that's my app. That's what I built. And so they did have an idea that I knew how to program, but just with anybody, if you say, oh, I know how to program, they think you can do everything. Like you can hack the planet if you can program anything without any context. So then they came to me and said, well, hey, maybe can you do this? And so yeah, I did.
But it's a great example because, I mean, what you did here is actually what I will recommend most people try to do. When you want to break into tech, when you want to find your first gig, there's actually a high chance of you have something in your surroundings, at your current job, in your neighborhood, in your city. I mean, your neighbors, a small business right there, a restaurant. You actually have an opportunity potentially to put yourself out there and find your first opportunity. And it's going to be, you're not going to sign the, six-figure salary at that moment, but it's going to be your break into tech. It's going to be what makes you kind of, you start to build your credentials. And so that's really
Yeah.
great. I mean, yeah, blackjack dealer. I'm guessing you had kind of, you know, different hours, so you were able to do your computer repair during the day and maybe blackjack dealing in the evenings and things like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, my son was really young, and I knew that I couldn't, work nights forever. I needed
Yeah,
to do something to kind of get out of the rat race that I was in, and I knew that coding can do it. At the time when I was in high school learning coding, everybody needed a degree, and so it was hard for me at that time, 18, 19, 20 years old to like get into coding without any sort of college degree. And so it kind of flipped here recently with probably in the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years,
yeah,
where there's such a need for it. They say, if you can code and you can prove to me you can code, like you're it, like we'll take you. So,
yeah. No, well,
um,
I think really it's probably with coding bootcamps. I will believe like coding bootcamps have established kind of a pathway and kind of created credentials that makes um, being able to get a job in tech without a computer science degree or college degree possible. Now it doesn't mean that you have to do coding bootcamps to get the skills. Like you can definitely get the skills, get a job in tech, just self-taught. But it's made it more possible for people to aspire to that, right? Like it's kind of becoming the norm now. And actually, to that point, there were recent reports I read that indicated that enrollment in traditional college is dropping down. It's going down. And enrollment in coding bootcamps actually are continuing to go up. So there's really a dynamic shift in higher education right now where people are really questioning, why am I paying that amount of money again? And especially, I mean, with COVID going away, it may change a little, with it's always pleasant to be on campus, but then you have to wonder, am I really going to pay, 60 grand just to be on a nice campus that sometimes may
yeah,
not be that nice? So yeah. Hey, let's actually answer a few questions before we continue
sure.
with our conversation. So, all right. So here's B Robes asking, I've gone over the CSS course twice now, and I still feel pretty overwhelmed getting so many things thrown in at once. Any tips to help it stick a little easier? And what I think probably B is referring to is you're probably in the 4 weeks introduction bootcamp, and I will think you're probably in the second week. And I will say, well, if you think CSS is tough, wait for next week. But we won't go there just yet. But how do you think student can manage, being overwhelmed with the amount of new knowledge that's thrown at them?
Yeah, and I get a similar question like this all the time. So I teach the React Native course, and so by the time the students get to me, they've taken quite a few courses and spent several weeks working with this, and they say, it still doesn't stick for me. What can I do? And I ask one question, and the answer is typically the same with everybody. It's almost 100%. And I say, have you started a portfolio project, or if you
Yeah.
tried to put it into place on your own? Take the skills that you learned and then try to use that skill in any project. And the answer is typically no. And what happens is a lot of times students get into like I forgot what it's called, but basically they just keep taking classes and watching videos, thinking that it's
Yeah,
just going to
tutorial
stick by
hell.
watching video. Yeah, tutorial
Yeah.
hell. And I just don't know if that's ever been the case from any student that I've ever talked to, that is ever going to be the fix. But what seems to work for everybody is that if you actually take what you learned and apply it to something, it doesn't mean that you have to recreate Amazon.com as a project in order for it to stick. It could be a tic-tac-toe, or it could be really just about anything. Go find a website and try to replicate that with CSS, and you'll find that you're going to learn probably more in that period of time than you did from the class.
Yeah.
But what the class did was give you that base knowledge of knowing what this thing is that I'm looking at, so that you can go and find the resources to apply it. But applying it's probably going to be the best way to
Yeah,
make
no,
that stick.
totally. And I would say, B, in your case, I mean, you're pretty early as well. And you probably don't. I mean, if you're indeed in the pretty much the second week of your journey, you probably don't have a lot to go with in terms of building your own thing. But you've already learned how to do an HTML form, so build another one. I mean, we have a form. Just build another one that's kind of similar, and try to do something like a little bit different. Maybe add a date picker or something like that, and see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, try to apply as much as possible. That's a great advice. Let's see. Huh. All right. So another question from Michael. Are you ever too old to learn to code? I'm currently learning Java and I love it. What do you think, Matt?
I think it was about a year ago. I taught a gentleman that was about 70 years old.
Wow.
He went through the course. His name was John. Really nice guy, but he had such a passion for wanting to learn and to continue. I actually feel that because he had that passion to continue to learn at an age that was much higher than mine, that it probably gave him a little bit better edge for like like mental illnesses, because you keep things spinning.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know what age people are, but I don't think that there's ever an age that's too late to learn anything, but especially coding. But I've seen students at 56 years old, they still get hired because if they can code, they can code. So
Yeah.
that's really the deciding factor in hiring is, can you do the job that we need you to do?
Yeah, I will, and I didn't think about that point that you're making in terms of it really allows you to keep practicing your mind and how you think, and you may actually put some illnesses at bay, like Alzheimer and stuff like that. I mean, I think there's some research that says some people who are practice thinking, reading. I mean, you need to keep practicing your mind pretty much and challenging yourself to actually help with some of that. I think it's fair to say that in the industry, but I will say like any industry, there's some level of ageism. But I think to your point, in an industry where so much, where people seek so much senior individuals, senior in terms of skills, but also senior in terms of maturity, I will say.
Sure.
There's actually something also to be said that, okay, even if there is ageism, and there is ageism in pretty much any industry, you may have actually a better chance of finding a job at a higher age, I will say, just because you've achieved a level of maturity and definitely you need to, of course, love to learn to code. But yeah, that could definitely help. All right, let's see. All right, that's a great question for you from Gregory. So Gregory is a student at New Camp, and he's starting the full stack portion. He wants to know which class or subject do you teach, and so go for it, and then we'll actually spend more time on that, on all the challenges surrounding that class, and why you are pretty much the in-house expert at this time.
Yeah, so I kind of started out teaching React, and then as my students moved into React Native, I just kind of stayed there. But I'm always through all the different channels, kind of helping out, because I kind of feel like if I help out some in the React channels, then as they get into React Native, then that maybe they'll need less help with some of the React portion of it. But yeah, I teach mostly React Native.
And so you've actually started building apps, right? I mean, what you were telling us for the casino was an actual app. How did you build that one? Was it native code or was it React Native at the time?
Yeah, it was Android.
Oh, it was Android at the time. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that app that I wrote is that I wanted to write an app that all the casinos could use. I wanted to write a single code base. And so I wrote it to where you could modify it in a website and it would build an APK on one of my servers. Then you could just download it with the customized.
Ooh.
What I didn't know, like that was kind of like, if I had progressed that even further, it's kind of like where React Native is, right? You can build it in JavaScript. and
Yeah.
then deploy it. And yeah, so that was 5 or 6 years ago. I just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know about React
Yeah.
Native at the time, but yeah, it was. I'll tell you, once I found React Native compared to like Android native, I have no reason to kind of go back to doing Android.
So let me ask you this. What do you like about React Native and what don't you like about React Native?
What I like about React Native is that it's getting so much more popular with other platforms. And so I need to just kind of mainly understand one code base. So you could have React Native for Windows, Android, iOS, Mac, and I think there's a couple more that they have now. So you can have a single code base now for 5 or 6 different platforms, which is really nice. It's never really been done before. Normally, companies, if they need an app on 6 different platforms, they would hire full teams.
Yeah.
You know iOS, okay, you're going to learn iOS. Same with Android, Windows, but now with hey, if you understand JavaScript really well, you can pick up React, then you're on your way to React Native, and now you can just kind of develop into one app for across like 5 or 6 different platforms. So yeah.
So that's what you like. What don't you like about React Native? And I think I know the answer to that one.
Yeah, the setup of React Native can be a little bit of a pain, but it
Yeah.
really that struggle really kind of helps you learn what it takes to progress as a developer. Like you have
Interesting.
to kind of set your emotions aside.
Mhm.
When you can get real frustrated, even just at the very beginning of setting up React Native, if you can get through that and smile at the end of it, then you just got to keep on, doing that same thing over and over again as you continue throughout the course. But understanding that React Native or React or Flutter or anything, they all have those same little challenges when it comes to either setting the environment or different, developing for different platforms. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing for React Native is
Yeah,
getting it set up.
I would agree. And what's for the people listening, it really opens the student to different paradigms, I would say, and really concepts that are very prevalent in the industry. And those concepts are virtualization, because you're going to need to virtualize a phone, right?
Yeah,
Um, and um, and that is actually a concept that's used throughout the industry. I mean, when you think about containers, when you think about Docker, these are all about virtualizing environments. And so
yeah,
that's and at first you don't necessarily realize you're doing it, um, but then once you've done it, you actually start to understand, what it means to virtualize and virtualization and emulators and emulating something, and how those two come together. Um, so yeah, your very first exposure is through React Native, and of course, if you don't have the right setting in the BIOS, then it's going to be a pain and things like that. But yeah, after that, you learn about Docker potentially, and you're going to kind of be a little bit more familiar with what it's trying to do. So pretty cool. Thank you. Let's chat. Let's take another question. Oh, that one is really interesting from Code Tinth. And then we'll get back to your journey. All right. I think you just mentioned both React Native and Flutter. Do you have experience with Flutter? And can you compare the two?
I don't have really any experience with Flutter. I know of it. I don't
Yeah.
know much about it. Um, but what I have seen compare the two is that eventually they'll probably both be really good and they'll both probably be really used. So I don't think it's like one's better than the other. Right
Mhm.
now, I'd say that React Native has a huge head start. You
Yeah.
have big companies that are backing it. I mean, Microsoft and Facebook are both developing things for React Native.
I didn't know
That
that
doesn't
Microsoft
happen
was
very
doing it
often.
now.
What's that?
I didn't know that Microsoft was doing it now. That Microsoft
Yeah,
was
so
behind
React
React
Native for
Native.
Windows and React Native for Mac is done by Microsoft. So,
Oh,
um,
really?
mhm.
Oh, wow.
So I
So,
figured
so if you want to build an app that goes into the Microsoft Store for Windows, you do it in React Native. Are they doing it
yeah,
for Xbox as well? Do you know if
is it
I'm
for
not
what?
Xbox?
I think so. Actually, I think their
Oh,
dashboard, the Xbox dashboard, is built in React Native.
yeah,
Don't quote me
really.
on that.
Yeah,
I think I read somewhere that it is. So I figured if Facebook is spending their resources on building that
yeah,
out, and Microsoft is jumping in, they don't jump in together very often.
oh, yeah,
I figured that it's going to be around for a while.
yeah,
Not everything lasts forever. I mean, you can ask, Visual Basic about
yeah.
that, um, but yeah, I figured that. But Flutter, I mean, it's gaining some traction as it gets going. But the nice thing about React Native is that it's mainly JavaScript, and
Hmm.
JavaScript is used really
Yeah,
has a really big wide exposure to it. Whereas Flutter uses Dart, and I've
that's right.
I've looked
Completely
at
different
Dart, and it's
language.
a little confusing.
Yeah. And Flutter is Google, right? I mean, it's kind of the Google
Yeah,
answer to React
yeah,
Native. All right,
right.
cool. All right, so let's actually go back to your journey. So you were in Tacoma. You had built that app for the casino.
Hmm.
You knew you wanted to go in that direction. You joined us as an instructor,
Yeah.
and I think it's right off the bat, people really loved being taught by you. And do you actually keep in touch with some of the students you first taught in Tacoma?
I've a couple every once in a while. I kind of reach out and check in on, and they say
All right.
hi. Yeah,
And I would say, so when was it that you moved? 2 years ago? You moved and in
yeah. I
California, in
moved to North Carolina.
North
Yeah, it's been
Carolina,
a
right?
little over 2 years now. Right, kind
Yeah.
of right when New Camp's like we're trying to start this program where we're going to be doing online,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
said awesome because I want to continue teaching, and that kind of worked out really well there.
So you moved to North Carolina. Was it because of your new job? Okay, so tell us
Yeah,
about that. Tell us. So you were teaching in Tacoma, Washington, which,
yeah,
by the way, if people don't know, it's like 25 miles south of Seattle. And it's starting to gain traction in terms, building the tech ecosystem over there. But it's not Seattle. I mean, it's always been kind of, think about Sacramento versus San Francisco or Oakland. I mean,
yeah.
it's still behind for terrible reasons, I would think. But so you're in Tacoma and you're teaching with us, and you don't yet have a full-time job as a dev, right? Or do you?
Right. No, not at the
No, you
time.
don't. And so tell us about that journey. So you're interviewing for a company that's in North Carolina.
Yeah. So
Tell us how
the
it goes. Tell us, like, how do you get from Tacoma, Washington to getting a job in South Carolina, packing your things and then go?
so I started applying for jobs in the dozens. Like
Yeah.
I just spent a lot of time applying for jobs, not so much getting really emotionally interested in particular jobs, because I
Hmm.
felt that if I get too like into a particular job, the
Yeah.
disappointment of getting ghosted by that company just was a lot more. So I played the numbers game, and I said, let me just apply for as many jobs as I possibly can. And I think over the course of 9 months, I applied for about 25 a week, like LinkedIn,
Oh, nice.
easy apply,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I just applied as quickly as I could um, to as many jobs as I possibly could. I didn't read the job descriptions because I figured that if if I didn't apply to a job, I don't get the job. They're not
Yeah.
going to come to my house and knock on my door and say, "Hey, you forgot to apply for this job." But if I apply for the job and they say you're not qualified, then at least I did my part of applying. But I also looked at it as if I applied for a job and they said, well, maybe he's not fully qualified, but maybe he's qualified enough and he meets enough of the criteria that we'll give him a chance, at least to give him an interview. I figured that I had a lot more opportunities to practicing my interviewing skills and things
Mhm.
like that by just kind of getting just a wide exposure. So that was my take on it. So I applied for a ton of jobs. I got contacted by an agency that I applied for, and they said, we have a job in Raleigh, North Carolina. Would you be interested in applying? And in my head, I said, I'll never move to Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm in Seattle. It's a huge tech hub. If I can't get a job here in Seattle, like I'm doing something wrong, right? So I said, but this is a great time for me to practice my interview.
Oh, I see.
So I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move. Like I'll pack right now, so I'm ready to go. So I practiced and I got one interview and I practiced that one. And apparently I did well in the practice that they asked me again for another interview. All of a sudden I did like 5 or 6 interviews and I said, I'm practicing a lot. And they said, hey, we'd like to fly you out to North Carolina for a face-to-face. All my interviews have been on Skype. And, and so there's another story. I got to jump back a little bit. As far as my interviewing goes, when I practiced my interviews, what I did was I would come back home from my interviews and I'd try to remember as many questions as I could from these interviews. And I'd write down kind of a script of what I would say or what I should say in that interview if I were to get that same question. So I try to kind of build my interviewing skill.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did this and I was able to practice like a script, like an actor, all of these questions. So when I actually got this interview, it was kind of came out naturally, these answers, because I had said it so many times over and over again. So I'd practiced so many times that now I'm on my like 5th or 6th interview and they want to fly me out to Raleigh. And I gave them the question. I said, are you paying for this? Because I'd never been in that situation where they actually want to like pay money to see me come out there. And so I did. I went out there and I met with the team and I met with everybody, and it wasn't a real formal interview. There wasn't no more technical questions. I had my laptop ready. I had code examples, everything I needed. None of that was in part of it. So I said, this is really interesting. And I asked the HR person at the end, I said, this is like my 5th or 6th interview and you guys flew me all the way out here. When am I going to find out if this is like going to happen? Because keep in mind, like in my head, I was never.
You're never going to go there. Yeah.
It's never going to happen. And so they flew me out and everything. And I said, this is going to happen. And so they said, oh, we'll let you know by Friday. It was like a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I go to get on the plane. I'm about to board the plane. And the recruiter called me and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that they have an offer for you.
Oh, wow.
And I lost it. I mean, it was like my whole life just flashed before my eyes. All the hard work of interviewing and all the hard work of practicing. And I mean, because keep in mind, while I was a blackjack dealer, I would spend 30-minute breaks coding. So there was no break time. I did everything I could to code as much as I could, even though I was working so much. So I ended up getting the job and I moved to Raleigh.
So how quickly in your mind did you say, well, actually, I'm going? No way, I'm not going. Like, how quickly did it take you to do that, like, turnaround?
Yeah, well, when they told me that they wanted to fly me out, and I said, this is like real now. It's not like I'm just practicing now. This is like real. I need to make this decision.
Yeah.
But what I decided on is that even if it was low paying, I knew that I just needed to put in enough time to get that real world production experience as a developer before everything else changes. So I actually didn't care about the amount as long as it was enough for me to go there and to only work that one job and be able to spend time with my family. Because at the time I was working nights, so I would work at night, sleep during the day. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my wife and my son. And I knew that regardless of what happened, as long as those things happened, even if I was just barely making it, as long as I knew that I could make that change, I was moving to Raleigh.
Oh, wow. So do you like it there?
I really love it.
They probably are listening.
I really do. I really like Raleigh.
That's great.
Like there's no traffic here. Yeah. It's very good. I like it.
All right, let's take more questions from the audience. This is fantastic. I want to ask you about, I mean, that's the first job. We'll talk about the next job, and everything you've done since.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at and do you see the questions as well? If you want to pick one.
I see.
Okay. So I see one from Moses, and I think Moses tried to join us earlier, but here it is. Moses has very little knowledge in IT and would love to hone the coding. Where should he start with?
Well, I think the fundamental course is a really good one because you're not fully invested in like a $60,000 a year program to go coding. You get 4 weeks, and then you get to decide is this something that I can do? Is this something that prepares myself. So I would start with kind of just the basics. And if you get excited, if you wake up in the morning and can't wait to like get and just write more code, then I think it's right for you, and that's where you could start.
Yeah, no, totally. And by the way, I mean, the 4 weeks is a great, the start, the end, the outcome is going to be, do you want to continue or not? There's nothing wrong in, going online and trying a few things. Don't fall into tutorial hell. I mean, there's a ton of pitfalls that you want to avoid if you start online, but it's also a great way to just get started. So that question from Droid, pretty much, I mean, he's cramming as much JavaScript as possible before starting full stack, which is great. What should you focus on in GS these final few days? Let me take a stab at that. I would say, and please, I mean, follow up with your thoughts. The two things for me. Think about how you really do you have really a great understanding of functions, passing variables, returning variables, dab into our functions if you can, but really understanding functions. I would say that, I mean, understanding loops is a given. I mean, you need to understand while, for each, I mean, those things. But then I would say spend time in terms of data structures and manipulation of data structure. Spend time really understanding how you're going to manipulate an array and how you're going to manipulate an array of objects. And then go into the map functions. Really make sure that you understand mapping correctly. And then once you feel really confident with mapping, an array of objects, try reduce and see how you like it. But I would say, yeah, functions, our functions, then really managing an array, a ton. I mean, I'm still coding myself. You spend an enormous amount of time fetching data that turns into, I mean, that's an array of stuff, and then doing something with it, which is mapping that array of stuff into other stuff and passing it back and forth pretty much. So practice with that, and I think you should be fine. Everything else is going to be, pretty much framework specific, how React works. But that's kind of the fundamentals of GS, I would say. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Understanding objects and arrays is going to be the biggest thing, and anything involved in any of those things, like manipulating objects, manipulating arrays, is going to be really, really super helpful. Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, cool. Another question from, I'll take that one. Augustine, I will think. How do we have pre-course material? So yes and no. Our pre-course material is really the 4-week introduction bootcamp. So you can take that. It prepares you for full stack. You don't have to take it. You can take a test. We require you to take a test before you actually enroll, and you have to hit 85% correct answers. So if you don't hit 85% correct answers, then you should learn either by enrolling in that 4-week bootcamp, or, as I said, you can learn the fundamentals of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on your own. There's a ton of great content to help you do that. So that's how we do it. All right. So let's actually, we'll go back to the questions I'm looking at. All right. Yeah, Emmanuel, that says objects, more objects, lol. Yeah, and add to that arrays, more arrays. So let's continue with your journey. So you're getting that job in North Carolina. You're gonna move. And this is your first job. It's your way in. You have a foot in the door, great foot in the door. And I'm looking at your LinkedIn now. Are you still there? No, you've moved, right?
I'm still with.
You're still there. That's right.
Yep.
Do you want to mention where it is? Do you want to talk about the position?
Yeah. So I'm a software engineer at the American Board of Anesthesiology, and I should be up for my promotion here in the first. I think it's in June or July is when they're planning on promoting me to senior. So just waiting on that. My boss actually had thought that I had been there longer, but then he said, oh, you've only been here for a year and a half, so we'll have to wait another 6 months till you get your 2 years. I said, oh, okay.
Fair. But then what I find fascinating is, so you enjoyed this current job, fantastic, but you've done, I mean, tell us about what you're doing as well. Um, so tell us about Squiddy.io, for example. I mean, make your pitch. Like, if you want 5 minutes of advertising, please go for it. You're welcome to do it.
So we've actually migrated from Squiddy to something else. It's called Higher Talk. That's
Oh, I see
the
it now.
new
I see it
thing.
as well. Oh, is that the same
But
thing?
it's what happened was while I was developing Squiddy, we decided that we all hated one-click apply, and we think that basically all they're doing is clicking. When you click a button to one-click apply, it just emails your resume or LinkedIn profile to that company, and then they still have to parse it through their system. And so we weren't a big fan of that. And so I came up with an idea that how can we kind of avoid that and have a better system for Squiddy? And then I came up with Higher Talk. What Higher Talk is, it's a system that allows companies to interview candidates for jobs without actually being live in person. So now they can interview 100% of the candidates rather than just the ones that they quickly, briefly go through the stack of resumes.
Oh,
so now
wow.
they can just broadcast out, hey, if you want to apply for this job, you can interview. As you go through the interview process, it will take the key phrases that the company is looking for and the key phrases that the candidate has mentioned, and then score the candidate, and then give a good candidate for the company.
So
based
you're
on that.
passing audio. You're passing audio for keywords and stuff. So you're doing audio. I mean, speech recognition.
Yep.
So let's step back a little. You are now a serial entrepreneur in a way. Actually, not.
Oh yeah, I'm constantly. Yeah.
You're so that's the thing I wanted you to kind of share with us. You've founded two companies. So Squiddy and now it's Higher Talk. You are co-founder there, right? And you are the chief technology officer at those companies.
Yeah. So Squiddy, it's actually a really good story. If you don't mind taking,
I'll
take
go for it.
minutes on Squiddy. So Paul, again, regardless of anything, Paul has changed my life again in this situation. So this is very interesting. Paul calls me one day, again, out of the blue, and says, I really want you to meet this guy. We're starting this project. We think you'd be really great for it. We would like to, meet with you. I want you to meet Luke, the founder. I said, oh, okay, cool. Where's Luke from? And he said, I think he's in Raleigh, North Carolina, or something like that.
Oh, no way.
I said, Paul, do you know that I moved to Raleigh? He goes, you did? You moved? When did you move? Right. So we had that conversation. I said, oh, okay. So let me call Luke and talk with him. And I said, so Luke, I'd like to meet you in person since we're both in Raleigh. Do you have, where would you like to meet? Let's meet up and have lunch. I said, pick any place. I said, I'm new here, so wherever it is you'd like to meet, I'm ready, right? He said, how about the Cowfish? Do you know where that is? I said, yeah, I actually know exactly where that is. I said, it's actually in the bottom floor of the building that I work at. And that's where I had my very first lunch from my team. So you imagine Raleigh, it's a very small city, but it's still fairly big. But out of all the restaurants that are possible, you just so happen to pick the only one that I knew of. So I said, this is just crazy how life kind of puts things in your way. Yeah. But that's where I met Luke through Paul to start Squiddy, and then now Higher Talk, which is actually it's launching here in the next couple of days. So
and let's give a kind of an idea of people listening. So what you're trying to do, I think, with Squiddy and Higher Talk is really to solve the skills matching problem. Jobs matching skills with individuals. I mean, applicants. And so you're really trying to kind of build something smarter in that space.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
So Yeah, that was another thing. What I realized with students in particular, we get the question a lot of how can we convey in our resume that we have the skills to do the job without actually having previously done the job. And so I thought, well, HireTalk kind of solves that problem if I can get a big exposure for it, because now you're saying anybody can apply for the job. The resume really doesn't matter too much, because if you can talk the talk, then all you have to do is walk the walk at the end of it. But what I found is that resumes, you only get about a 10% chance of actually getting to the interview phase. Whether your resume might get discarded by the system. Even if you had a great resume, but your styling is a little off, so the system doesn't parse it right. And so one of the things that we're trying to solve with HireTalk is to say, well, let's just let everybody apply. And if everybody from every skill level can apply, and you meet the criteria for the job, then give that person an opportunity to prove themselves.
And that's brilliant. And you're really doing that by, getting to the conversation, but trying to have that conversation and evaluation at scale. So you're not filtered by, a bot that scans your resume anymore. You're more filtered on how you engage, how you talk. That's brilliant. So Michael, by the way, I see that you're waiting for us. Michael, if you want to join, I'd love for you to switch on your camera. That'll be great. And then I'll bring you onto the floor. We have Michael waiting for us here. So if you can hear us, Michael, just switch on your camera and we'll bring you over. We have another question for you, which really is about, that's domain space that you're talking about. How do you apply?
Yeah. I saw this and I was really happy that you were bringing it up. But yeah.
So can you answer that question? Is there value in providing cover letters, or what is the best methods to apply for jobs today?
So my take on the question is I think that part of this is more of a mentality thing, not necessarily. I don't say it's necessarily saturated, but I think that by considering yourself entry level and only looking for entry level jobs, you're minimizing the amount of jobs that you're applying for. So if you're not applying for the job, you're not going to get it. So if you apply for all of the jobs, regardless of the skill levels, even if it says senior, you can still apply for it. Excuse me. And the reason that I say that is because sometimes cities don't have juniors and they don't have entry level, mainly because of the wage and not because of what they're actually looking for in skill. And I've talked to a couple recruiters for different cities, even for the same job, and consider that somebody that is in Seattle, a junior position, and someone that's in, let's say, a city in Texas for a junior position, the wage difference would have to be so different because of the cost of living, that you don't find a lot of junior positions in Seattle because nobody could afford to live there on a junior position or an entry-level position. So whereas they would hire you as a software engineer, and in their system, you're just a software engineer, but in the team, they know that you're just getting started. Imagine if they didn't do that, and now someone in Seattle that's a junior or entry level is getting paid $90,000 a year to live there, and now imagine someone from the same company in Texas gets paid $60,000 a year. They're wondering why they're getting paid $30,000 less. Yeah. So in order to avoid that, they don't post junior positions, because they can keep the wage to where they want it to be based on location and the job title.
So you should never, if you think that, and most people who, almost all people who come out of a coding bootcamp will be considered junior, but you should really never just look for junior positions. You should look for any type of position and just apply. Great advice.
Yeah. As an example, the company that I work for, the ABA, they put a job out for a software engineer, but they didn't get very much traction on it. I actually found a student from New Camp that I had contacted me several times for help, and I knew she had the aptitude to do the job. And so I went to my boss and I said, she may not be a full stack engineer, but if you're having trouble finding a full stack engineer, let's take somebody on that's a little bit less, a little bit more junior, and build her up to that level
Yeah.
over time if we see that she has that capability. And then now, because she applied, she has the option, they have the option to hire her because she actually applied as opposed to somebody that didn't apply.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, and it's probably the best route for companies to really seek junior developers and actually really spend the time and the energy of to invest in them. It's going to be the best bang for the buck, honestly. There's one risk for companies, not for the employee, is once you've spent a year in the company, you could just say, hey, thanks for everything. I'm out of here.
Yeah,
I have a much better
yeah,
position now. And it's true that I think for companies, they have huge incentive in really seeking junior developers, but they should also really think hard about keeping those junior developers in their company and really keeping the incentive at the right level.
right.
Because otherwise, they're not going to invest in juniors who are going to have a great experience, but then are going to be kind of, swayed or wooed by, the fangs at that moment
Yeah,
for that second position. So it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. And even Amazon, I don't know if you saw the news, Amazon is actually in a very tough spot trying to compete for talent, and they had to kind of almost double the base pay. Now you could think that the base pay was already pretty high,
yeah.
160K, but they, put it at almost twice as that. So yeah, it's crazy. All right, so there's another question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. It's gone really fast. How realistic is it to get a US job if based in another country? I would say it is possible if you're thinking about contractor positions. And this is a model that has been in the US for years. It's called outsourcing. And you can definitely do it. I would say you will not get an employee position. It will be pretty hard if you're seeking to become an employee of the company while living abroad. But definitely as a contractor, and there's a ton of websites that uh, Upwork or LinkedIn, I think, as a marketplace now as well. You can certainly get a job like that. And if you're in a country with lower cost of living, that could really play to your advantage. If you have the skills and your hourly rate is nowhere near what people are asking in the US, that could actually play in your advantage. So yeah, I wouldn't get too discouraged, but I would really not even try the employee route. Anything that's visa and everything would be pretty rough to get.
Yeah, it's a little costly for companies to go that route. Contract
Yeah,
route is usually the best way.
that's right. Speaking of that, let me actually talk about what I've seen happening myself. There's a lot of outsourcers. So what we call outsourcers are the usually Indian-based companies that for decades actually have been invited by US regulations to seek work from US-based companies and really kind of outsource that work in India because of cheaper labor, to be honest with you. There was pretty much, I think it was a political move to help India grow their economy like 40 years ago or something like that. That has changed dramatically over the last few years with the reduction of H-1B visas. And so what we are seeing right now is a lot of Indian-based outsourcers really hiring in the US instead of hiring in India, hiring in the US. And it has a double effect. Oh yeah, there you go. um, it has kind of an interesting effect. First is it does create jobs in the US, but it's bringing the wages down as well. And so I'm seeing myself outsourcers having interesting deals where, well, we're going to train you for a year, but we're going to pay you 40 grand, 45 grand, where the industry wage will be minimum 60, 65, 70 potentially. So, yeah, just about, contract work and the Indian outsourcers, there's an interesting dynamic happening here. And by the way, that dynamic kind of really creates more work and more jobs in the US. So if you think about it this way, it's a great development. Do you want to add anything, Matt? We're actually on time. It's 4 p.m. already here. Anything else that you would like to say? Departing thoughts?
Yeah. For anybody that's interested in joining the boot camp, like you're just not sure if this is something that you want to do. One thing I notice about students is that the ones that do well are the ones that never give up. And so if you're the type that is going to, consistently work hard, regardless of the problems that you have with your setup or with your code, and just get into the mindset of always learning and always like work through your problems, I think you can definitely be a developer. So.
Right. Well, yeah. And I want to say, Matt, you have been with us for so long, and you're known. I mean, everybody knows Matt at New Camp for all the right reasons. You've shown tremendous interest in helping everyone in the community. I mean, you're doing special workshops on React Native. You've helped, I don't know how many students. Actually, I should have checked. Do you know how many courses you've delivered with us? Oh, let me check real quick.
I think the last time I checked the count, it was around 800 students, but that doesn't include the Redux workshops that generally have 30 to 50 students each. So,
well, let me tell you right now, 4.72 rating for 806 ratings total, and you've delivered, oh my God, you've taught 24 React Native courses.
Yeah, I haven't missed one. I think right now this is the first kind of course that I haven't been able to really teach. So
yeah. Well, for your daughter, obviously. Yeah, Irene was telling me that she was surprised to see you on the show today because you've been lacking sleep for a few weeks apparently.
Yep. Yeah, but I just didn't realize that I had been confirmed all the way, and so that was just a misunderstanding on my part.
That's fine.
But I'm glad that I was able to jump on. I'm glad that I was able to be here with you guys.
Me too. I was really looking forward to it. And again, thank you so much, Matt, for everything you're doing at New Camp and for all the help you're providing for your students. Good luck with the startup. Good luck with fixing the recruiting and interviewing problem. It's an important problem to fix and to solve. So thank you. And thank you, everyone. Kotlin, Droid, Priscilla, Anuja, good to see you here. I go, you go, we all go. We'll see each other again on Slack or next week. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.